All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining the Pearson Mathology.ca online information session. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. My name's Miranda, and you'll notice that you will only be able to hear me, but you won't be able to answer back because you're on mute. That's just for recording purposes. It makes it a little bit easier so that there's no interruption. But feel free to ask any questions during the session, and you can type them into the chat box, and then Soyen will get those questions right to me. And if I don't end up answering one of them, we will definitely reach out to you after the webinar. So feel free to ask questions as we go, and she'll let me know what you're asking, and I'll be sure to address them as I go. All right, so let's get started. So Pearson Mathology is a set of K-8 digital and print resources. In the middle, you see the professional learning resources and some of the research that we've done to underpin these resources. And then on the right-hand side, you see some of the classroom resources that we have. We have little books, activity kits, and the digital platform that you're going to learn about a little bit more today. So Pearson Mathology helps you know where your students are and helps you decide next steps for their learning. It helps engage all students at all levels while helping them build a little bit of confidence and their math skills. This is all done through lots of fun and engaging activities and stories, of course supported with that job-embedded professional learning that I'll show you as we get closer into the digital version. All of this has been adapted for French immersion as well. So as we go, I'll show you some of the French versions as well. As we built Mathology, we thought about that math teaching journey. And we know that it takes a lot of time and it's a very multi-step process. Things from starting your long-range planning, thinking about what your year is going to look like as far as mathematics goes, and then to your short-term planning, your week by week or your month by month. From there, the preparation for your day-to-day lessons. So we know that teaching takes a lot of time, not just in the preparing, but in the execution or the instruction of that lesson, and then determining next steps to help move students along, as well as where you're going to go tomorrow. There's also supports in this teaching journey for helping you assess. And we know that assessing will lead to reporting at the end of those blocks of time. And professional learning will happen throughout. So as you're going through this journey, Pearson Mathology is going to attempt to help with some of these components along the way. Mathology.ca, its goal is to take all of the materials, the classroom activity kits, the Mathology little books, and the Pearson learning progression, and take it all and put it into one spot to simplify and enhance that teaching journey for you through smart use of technology. So we'll go into Mathology.ca and you'll see how you're able to access all the activities in the classroom activity kits and the little books in that online platform. So it helps you with planning, it'll help with teaching, assessing, and of course, professional learning throughout. So what does Mathology.ca do specifically? So it's an online tool that helps teachers with 5 core functionalities. It's going to help you search through all those activity kits and the books to determine the best lesson for your students and the needs of your classroom. It also helps you with the planning component. What will your day look like? What might your week look like? And what might your whole year look like? So there are planning supports all throughout that can help you in your math teaching journey. There's also aspects in there that can help you with the teaching. It will provide projectables and teacher notes that will help you be better prepared for teaching that lesson. As you go through lessons, it also provides you the opportunity to assess and keep track of how your students are doing as well as how your whole class is doing. And of course, professional learning is embedded throughout. Now, Mathology.ca is aligned to Canadian curriculum, and it's grounded on the learning progression. And I'll show you a little bit of that as we get in there. Of course, all supporting those rich math activities that you're going to see throughout. So before I dive into the online platform, does anyone have any questions about what Mathology.ca does? All right, looks like no questions. I'm going to keep going. So let's take a look. So when you get to Mathology.ca, you have a few ways to log in. You can sign in and register with your Google account or your Microsoft account. You can register with an email, and I'm going to go in on my account. I believe most people in here are from Ontario, so I'm going to use my Ontario password to get in, because this will align all my Ontario curriculum expectations. If you are a teacher from Alberta or a teacher from anywhere across the country, when you select and go into your Pearson Mathology account, it will correlate that curriculum for you. So this is the home page, and this is what you can see when you go into Pearson Mathology. There are 3 ways to search for lessons. You can search by keyword. For example, if I'm going in and looking for skip counting, oh, hang on. No one can see my webpage. Hang on. Are we good now? There we go. Sorry about that. So here you see the main web page, and I can go in and type in any topic that I want. So if I'm looking for skip counting, I can do a quick search, and I can see that there are 253 results that have to do with skip counting. Of course, that's going to be a lot, so I might simplify it by strand. I know that skip counting lives in all strands, but I might be more specific to number. I also have the option to select the grade. So right now, grade 1 is available in Mathology.ca, and grade 2 will be available in the fall. So here I see at a quick glance all the choices that I have for my skip counting lessons that are really specific to that. They're all tagged. You can see that it's a grade 1 activity, and the number is tagged as well, so I can see that. I can also search by curriculum. So if I go into curriculum, I can search by strand and overall expectation. So maybe I'm looking at measurement and I want to be working on the first overall expectation. So I can pull that down and take a closer look at the specific expectations that I might be working on with my class. So maybe I'm working on estimating, measuring, and describing the passage of time. So I can search, and I can see that there's one specific activity that's tagged to help support me with that particular expectation. If I was in geometry, I might be working on composing and decomposing shapes. So I do a quick search and I see 5 more activities and books that are tagged to support. So you can see in my version, I have the French and the English, but in yours, you just have French or English, depending on what you teach. The last way to search is by progression. We've got the learning progression in here, and that's just a foundation that we've built to help see how ideas develop over time. So in this case, I might be looking and working on the principles of counting. So I might look at counting and think about maybe working on some activities that work on sequencing backwards from the number 10. So I can do a quick search and I see any activities that might be connected to counting backwards. All right. I'm going to use one activity in particular. Let's say that I was working on skip counting and I want to work on skip counting forward, be even more specific. I've got grade 1, number, and let's say that I want to work on this particular activity. Once I determine what activity I'd like to do, I can do a quick read about the activity to decide, is this the one for me, or do I need to look for something different? It gives me a little bit of content background. So what do my students need to know in order to be able to be successful at this particular activity? It also tells me the focus and it gives me the curriculum expectations that are going to be met by doing this activity. I also have any cross-strand connections that will be available. It includes and is tagged to all of the processes or competencies that are included here, as well as the learning progression. It's highlighted in blue for those activities that are being, for those components that are being met by addressing this, by using Gord the Groundhog. But I know really quickly that if my students are struggling with this, I know where to go back to. And if they're doing really well with this, I know how to go forward. Let's say that I've decided that I really like this lesson. I have the option to make it one of my favorites, and then I can take a look in the details. The details are very similar to the activity cards. I'm not sure if you've seen them before, but the activity cards are laid out very similar to this. You've got a little bit of information at the top based on materials or any line masters that you might need. Of course, those are all modifiable. Then you've got instructions set up very similar to a 3-part lesson. You've got your before, your during, and your consolidation. You also have some options to differentiate and some tips for what to be looking for while your students are engaging in this activity. And you've got some questions to be asking along the way. From there, you've got your projectables. So if I pull this up, this is what the activity card looks like in the print version. And I have that option there for me that I can print out if I need to take a look. And that's the front of the card, set up very similar to Mathology.ca. On the back of the card, we see the assessment supports for the behaviors and strategies that students might be displaying while working on this activity. So if I see a student constantly mixing up the numbers, I have a next step right there for me. I'm also able to project the student card. So I may project it and have students come up to the board and circle how they might count, or I might print it out and use it as a black and white version for some of my students as well, so they can show their thinking. All of these cards come differentiated. So on the back of the card, you see a little more of an accommodated version to help support the different learners that you might have in your classroom. And the very one more projectable. We've got a multi-use card, a 100 chart that you might reference, as well as a completed version for yourself so that you know what this card might look like as it's completed. So for some students, they may need to work on that one-to-one correspondence, and they may be placing actual cubes on each one of the acorns and then grouping them. But for other students, they're a little more comfortable with circling. So it's up to you how you want to use that. For all of these, there's also interactive tools. So in this case, there's a 100 chart that's going to support me with skip counting. So perhaps I'm skip counting by twos. I could have students come up and click on each one of them and highlight how they skip count as they go through. But I might change the color and ask, how might it change if I skip counted by fives? Where would I highlight? And so they see that there are times when I might skip count by twos and I might skip count by fives, and some of them might land on the same spot. So I have that opportunity as well. So that's with the teaching component. As I'm walking around and students are working on the tasks, I can go in and use my assessment. So I just showed you the back of the card, and this is duplicated in the assessment section. I can upload all of my students, and then I can drag and drop them in. I can even make notes and comment on what I saw Tim doing while I saw him counting forward and struggling to get past 10. I might make a note on that. Another way is to highlight multiple students. Perhaps I saw 2 students demonstrating the exact same strategy, so I can click on them at the same time. For all of these, just like there are on the back of the card, you've got the next steps right here. So if I click on them, in the moment, I know exactly what to do to help support that student. Sometimes there might be an additional next step. So there may be an intervention activity, and I can click on it, and it will bring me to an intervention to help support this student based on where they're struggling with that particular component. So for this particular intervention where students have difficulty with the skip counting sequence, there's a mini lesson and additional practice, all of course with line masters that I can modify if I need to, and of course printable. So that's all there as well. So this is in the second, the last section for teaching, the related resources. So there are lots of mini lessons that support after this lesson. So for some of my students, they might be right on track and I might give them some more on-grade supports while I work perhaps with a small group to work on some intervention that I might need to do with that, to do with them. There are 2 different interventions for every activity as well as an extension within grade. And all of those, of course, are printable. There's also some possible misconceptions that students might display when working on this activity. So students might see the number as a label rather than a quantity. So it gives you some suggestions of what you might do. In addition to all the mini lessons, you also have some next steps in class that are there that you can work on playing games or doing some extra practice during gym or during transition times. And then next steps for at home, of course, that you can print and you can modify it to help support the needs of your parents as well. For all of the activities, there'll also be a word wall. So in this case, we've got skip count. If I click on it, the word will come up. From here, we know that when you're finished with your lesson, you might be thinking about, well, where do I go next? So I've got some options. I might want to go to skip counting with leftovers next, or I might go to skip counting backwards. For each one of them, there's going to be some lessons that you can follow up with, but also consolidation cards that are going to challenge students to think about skip counting both forwards and backwards in one activity. So you've got that option there. They're all set up the exact same way. So once you click on another activity, it's going to bring you to the exact same page where you see a little bit about the lesson and the curriculum as well. For every lesson to help you with the teaching, there's professional learning supports. So for every single activity, you're going to have a 1-minute video that will help support you in things to watch for when you're working on this activity with your class, but also maybe some setup tips or things to help you consolidate. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what this looks like. But for every single one of the 101 videos, there's going to be a small 1-minute video to help you out. I don't know about you, but sometimes I read the card and I have an idea of what I think it might look like, but these videos really help me work on it. So we have a question from Chandra. She's asking about the word wall words available in French. The entire site will be translated in Mathology.ca. And yes, the word wall words will be available on the French site as well. I hope that answered your question. All right, so here's a quick peek at the learning video.
As students are working, watch to see how they decide what number to skip count by. Do they realize that they skip count by the number of cubes in each tower? If the towers are 5 cubes high, they skip count by 5s. 5, 10, 15. Watch to make sure they are including the cubes in the dump truck in their total, and that they're counting them by ones. As an extension, you might want to ask how many more cubes need to be added to the dump truck so that another tower can be made. Do your students realize that the 2 towers of 5 have the same number of cubes as 1 tower of 10? Then show 3 towers of 10 cubes. Ask students how many towers of 5 cubes they think can be made using the same cubes. Do they realize that the total stays the same? The total number of cubes does not change, no matter how many towers are made.
So for all of these cards, you'll have that 1-minute video. So I just want to jump to show you what the books might look like. So there are activity cards, but there's also books. So when I click on a book, it'll bring me to a very similar setup. I'm going to learn a little bit quickly about the book. I'll see what kind of reading level it has. Know that most of these books are meant to be used as a shared reading, but we know some students might be able to read it themselves and they can use it either in a guided reading setting or an independent reading setting. So it's set up the exact same way for the books, but right here you get a link to the little book as well. So if I want to go in and read the story, I have the option to do that right here, right through the platform. So I'll just give you a quick peek there. So here we have the story, and either I can read the story or I have a little play button at the bottom, and the story can be read to my class.
Look over to the left. Do you see one enormous elephant? There are two eyes staring at you.
So that's where the little books are, and you get access to all of that. In addition to all the little videos to help support with the activity cards, you also have big idea videos where someone will help unpack the bigger concept. So in this case, you're going to have a video talking about the principles of counting and all the things you might think about when you're working on counting. I'm going to jump into the analytics. So let's say that you've now done several activities, and you've recorded and kept track of your students as you go. You'll see that my class is really small. This is just my sample class. But it's monitored by a little kind of like a red light, green light system, and that's determined by the mode of the students. So in this case, most of my students are doing pretty well, and in some cases, I should give you another example. So let's see, let me build one really quick. So let's see if I had all of my students sitting here and all of my students are having difficulty, or maybe 3 of them are having difficulty and one's not having too much difficulty. When I go back in my classroom analytics, when it loads in, I'll notice that the counting one that I just inputted needs a little bit of attention. And that's because the majority of my students, or most of my students, are sitting in the first box. So I need to do a little bit of work on that. And likewise, if I had most of my students sitting in the last boxes, I would have a little green check mark telling me that most of my class is doing pretty well on that. In addition to the classroom view, we also have a curriculum view. So in here, I also have the opportunity to see, based on the activities that I've worked on, which activities are meeting which overall expectations. So that will help me with my reporting. So I know that there's 1 in here, but I've done 4 activities that help work on this particular overall expectation. For students that I might be individually speaking to, so I might look at Tim. I might be having a meeting with Tim's parents, and I might want to talk to them about some of the things that he needs a little bit more attention on, and some of the things he's doing really great on. In here, I can go and take a closer look on the details, and I can talk to a parent really specifically about what they can do and what some next steps might be for that particular student, and I can always export and print that too. So I've got that option there for me. Any other questions so far? I see one more question here. Are there rubrics? Absolutely. So in the activity cards and in the, let me give you an example. Here's an activity card, and in the details, there are assessments right here that I can use. Let me pull a PDF for you. So this is the same as the back version of the card. So I may have done an observation, and I may document some of that student's learning, and I can speak directly to a parent about what I saw a student doing based on this particular activity. As far as the books go, I also have the opportunity to, let me grab a book. In this assessment, all of my line masters are here, so I'm going to have the assessment master. And so when I'm looking at some of the books, I have an opportunity to assess individual students with particular expectations that I've been working on, and I can keep track with if I've observed it, I've sometimes observed it, and consistently observed it. And I can also make notes of their strengths and their next steps that they might need. In addition, when I'm in consolidation cards, like I mentioned before, there are some consolidation cards. In that case, I have the option not just to do the individual task, but I have whole class assessments that I can track how students are doing, as well as the individual level. So I've got the whole group, and I can put in each student, but I can also do individual versions for one student at a time. So that's all available in there. So let's take another look. Let's take a look at planning. So once I know and get a little bit more familiar with Mathology.ca, I might go take a look at building a plan. And maybe I might start off with a weekly plan or a monthly plan. Okay, so I have another question. I'm actually going to just address it before I go into the plan component. So there are line masters that I can work on with most of these tasks. Let me give you some examples. So if I was working on hopping on and hopping back, there are going to be some line masters, the game boards. It depends on which one I'm looking at. There's line masters that are different for every single task. Let me see if I can find one where the kids might be working on it. They might be using a 10 frame and they can work on some of their thinking on a 10 frame. But there are other opportunities when I'm in the books where they might be doing a line master, and that I might use as my paper pencil task to have a little bit of more documentation for a parent. So for example, there are little story templates that I might use with this particular book, and they might do a little bit of work building a story and talking about how many when they skip count by 2s, maybe if they skip count by 5s or by 10s. We've got animals here 2 by 2, but I can adjust that. All of these are adaptable. So I might go animals in groups of 5 or animals in groups of 10. So all of those line masters you might be able to use as a product for some parents that are looking for something a little more concrete. You've also got the plans in here, like I said. So if I'm going in here, I might be thinking about building a plan from scratch. But I also might think about using some of the sample long-range planners. We've got different option long-range planners and also sample weekly planners. So I'm going to give you a look at one of the sample long-range planners. So in here, this sample long-range plan starts with geometry and moves into counting and then patterning and weaves back number as much as it can. So if I go back and I decide I don't like this one, I might go back and I might pick sample option 2. And maybe I decide that I really like the idea of starting with patterning and then moving into counting and comparing and ordering. If I decide that this plan is the one for me, I can decide to use it as my sample plan, name it whatever I like, and then I can adopt it and I can move it up and down, change my mind, write some notes. All of these I can share with my colleagues. I can export it to a document to take notes for myself. And I can also see what curriculum's been covered based on using that. So hopefully you were able to see how Mathology is addressing those 5 key functionalities of searching, planning, teaching, assessing and tracking, and of course, professional learning. So I'm just going to jump back to here, just in case there's any other questions. Can I show you how to add students so you can move them around when assessing? Absolutely. So let me just jump back in there. So when I'm adding students, I go into my student management system and I can add more students. So maybe I want to add, I don't know, Allison, M. And I can add that student pretty simply. And I can go in and name them anything I want. I might use the last name, I might not. That's up to you. I can develop a new class. Maybe I have a 1-2 split and I want to keep them separate. I can put in my grade 1s, but I can also add a new class and put in my grade 2s. I can rename it at any time and determine that this one might be my current class, in which case my default would always be for grade 1, but other times I might default to my grade 2s, if that's the case. Hopefully that answers your question. So once I add all my students in there and I'm going in to assess any of them, so let's say that I'm here and I'm assessing the students. Now all of a sudden I've got Allison in here, and now I can move Allison in, click and drag and drop her into the section that I need. Hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions before I get out of Mathology.ca and just wrap up? Oh, I see I've got one more. I'll just wait for that one. So we've got a question here that says, if your school has purchased the activity kits and the little books, will access to the online forum be able to be accessed? So unfortunately, it's a separate purchase. For some of our teachers, we know that they prefer to be in a print format. For others, we know that they like the digital. Those are available separately. So you can continue with the digital purchase, or you can go with the activity kit only, or you can go with a combination of the activity kit and the digital. And I'm going to go into prices right now, so hopefully that'll answer that question. So we'll take a little look right here. So currently in grade 1, English is available, and Mathologie, grade 1 will be available in the fall. Grade 2 will be available in the fall as well. Right now, the activity kits have over 101 math lessons, and the grade 2 has 185 of the math lessons. There are 34 Mathologie little books and 38 for grade 2. The learning progression is embedded for both of them, and of course there's 100 professional learning videos in grade 1 and 160 professional learning videos in grade 2. Grade 3-4 is coming in the fall of 2020, and all of those are available. They will be available on Mathology.ca. And all of this that I showed you today will be launching on the Mathologie website, and it will look the same. All the videos will be there, as well as the books and the activity kits. All the features you saw today will be available in French as of the fall. So for a 1-year subscription, per teacher, it's $140. And for a 5-year subscription, it's available at a 5% discount for $665. Of course, there's bundling prices, so you get an additional 5% and 10% discounts available when you purchase Mathologie little books and or activity kits. So for the person that just asked about you already owning the print versions, you can talk to your sales representative and talk to them about including a discount for Mathology.ca. So currently, free trials are available at etr.mathology.ca. You've got 45 days, and I'm guessing that most of you are already on there, but if you aren't, you can go in and set yourself up for a free trial. Like I said before, you can set yourself up using your Google account, your Microsoft account, or just a general email. And there are more webinars happening. There are more sessions available that you can take a look at. I'm going to be sending this all out to you, so all these links will be live. You'll receive it tomorrow morning, and you can always forward that on to a friend if they want to know a little bit more about it too. So I'm going to leave you here with the people to contact if you need more information, and I'll give you some time to either write it down or take a photo. I've got one more question about an email notifying when the French word walls will be available. The word wall words will be available. They'll be available when Mathology.ca is available, and that will be in the fall for the French. So any other questions? Oh, I've got a question about an email notification. No, there won't be an email notification as far as I know, but I can get back to you on that. All right, thanks everybody so much. Have a great evening, and thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us. Make sure to write down your contact if you need it or take a picture, but I'll leave it up and running just in case you need another few minutes or so. Thanks so much. Oh, we have a question about wondering if it would be redundant to have the online version and the print version. So it depends on what kinds of things you're looking for. So on the online version, for example, the colorful cards can be projected, but if you have the activity kit themselves, those are all white, like dry erase marker you can use on those cards, which really adds a totally different dimension to it. So if you're printing them in black and white, you're not going to have that same kind of experience that you get when you have the print version of the cards in your hand with students. I know they really love being able to write all over them and then erase them, and you can use those over and over again. So those aren't necessarily a consumable piece, but if you're printing one at a time, that of course you won't be able to save. So I think for part of it, it's going to save you a lot of time because those are already ready for you and you won't have to print them out. I think I have one more question. I've got a flashing light. You can print the cards. They'll be in black and white when you print them, but yes, of course, you can print them if you need to. I know some teachers like to print them so they have some formal documentation of the students on a piece of paper, but other teachers are taking photographs of those from the print version and just taking a photograph to help document. Any final questions? All right, thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening.